Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. So, for our discussion board of the second week, we were tasked with going through JSTOR, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite platforms to use when I'm searching for articles. And this week, I decided to do my focus on Joan of Arc, excuse me, just because my class was going through it at the time and I really find her interesting. And so hopefully most of you guys know kind of roughly the background of Joan of Arc, but basically sometime between the ages of 10 and 14, this, peasant girl basically started hearing the voice of God telling her that she needed to go help basically make a king. And with this, not only was she successful in this, she also was unfortunately executed by the English government for heresy. And when I was looking through, I found 3 articles that I really enjoyed. 2 were focused, like their content was focused more on the trials and like political aspects of her execution and that kind of stuff. And so the trial of Joan of Arc and then Joan of Arc, the church, and the papacy were the 2 that kind of coincided with that. Gareth Williams, Manipulation of the Maid focused a little more on her military experiences as well as some of her original younger years. But I will say I was a bit disappointed that none of them actually really went in depth into her background. I mean, they did, but I would have liked to have learned a little more about her younger years and just the stuff that brought this kind of revelation up to her. I do find it interesting that out of this time period, especially, the medieval ages was pretty well known for being very, very rough when it came to any kind of religious claims of that level. And she just kind of walked in and said, yeah, I'm hearing the voice of God. And the church did question her, but they actually determined her to be telling the truth, which was a very, very rare thing. Normally that was where most of these kind of stories ended, and the church would either convict you of heresy or just kind of shunt you away, and that was it. Not only did she convince the church that she was truly hearing the voice of God, she also managed to convince many, many soldiers, the king's people, all kinds of stuff. And I find it very interesting, and I wish I could have found a little more on her arguments, I suppose, in that area. But the 3 that I found were interesting just for the fact that they really do go into depth on what was going on later for her and how she kind of handled herself and all kinds of stuff. With Manipulation and the Maid, specifically going into the battles and everything, she was apparently a very, very devout Christian. She really pushed her experiences further than just talking about those. She tried to convert many of her soldiers and was successful, which I find interesting. Just the whole thing is interesting, honestly. But most of the 3 articles did seem to pull from her directly. It was more of a primary source. Obviously, I can't read French, which is sad, but they're all 3, I noticed, pulling from her spoken testimony because she was illiterate, so she was not able to really write down her own story, but she did have it transcribed, and she had a lot of eyewitness, accounts also that could write, talking about her and explaining what she's doing in the background and all kinds of stuff. So really interesting just findings in this. I'm surprised that I didn't honestly find more research on her. Just from the beginning, I actually had to dig quite a while to find the 3 that I did that I felt were of quality. There's plenty to talk about her, but I wanted specific background information, kind of overviewing her. Sorry, I'm in a classroom right now, so our bell is going off. But all kinds of stuff. And so really fascinating. I find the main thing that I was interested in was when she was hearing these voices. All 3 articles kind of tend to disagree on the exact timeline. Some say she was 10, some say she was 14, some say she was 16. So that was something just kind of an interesting little side note that I noticed. But overall, I honestly want to kind of study a little more into this just to see if there are more discrepancies, because I believe it was Joan of Arc, the Church, and the Papacy by Taylor, talking about how there is specific some of the soldiers kind of went into exaggerations, or they kind of built her up in a way. So I just found all that really interesting. Maybe you guys can look into that. I don't know. It was a good read. But hope you guys all have a good week, and I will see you next week.